start with our top story coming out of Afghanistan, where the Taliban have repelled attempts by Afghan forces to reach the U.S. plane crash site in central Ghazni province. Government officials say troops sent to the location were ambushed by Taliban fighters. The officials said there are 4 bodies, while 2 are alive but missing. The Taliban say Afghan forces backed by the U.S. had tried to capture the area. Spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid said the Taliban will allow a rescue team to recover the bodies from the site. He said the Taliban counted 6 bodies at the site. He added that it was not possible to ascertain the exact body count as fire had reduced everything to ashes. The Pentagon, though, has rejected the Taliban's claim that they shot down the U.S. military aircraft. In China, the death toll from the Wuhan coronavirus has now hit 106. Officials say that more than 4,000 people are now infected, with over 30,000 in medical observation.
The Chinese government has sealed off entire provinces, isolating over 50 million people to curb the deadly coronavirus. Over 4,000 people are infected in China, with cases also confirmed elsewhere in Asia, Europe, and North America. The U.S. consulate in Wuhan is preparing to fly its diplomats and other Americans out of the country. Japan, Mongolia, France, and other governments are also preparing for evacuations.
As you know, we are in the process of evaluating the possibilities of repatriating French nationals. Some 100 French nationals who sometimes requested, obviously in conjunction with the other ministries, the armed forces, the interior, in order to prepare the operation as smoothly as possible.
U.S. President Donald Trump has offered to help China in combating the spread of the virus. But the National Health Commission of China said difficulties for the patients seeking treatment for the virus have decreased.
So these 10,000 available beds are sufficiently able to alleviate the needs of those infected and the suspected cases, including those showing symptoms of fever and have to be warded for further inspection.
The World Health Organization has also admitted its initial assessment of the threat was incorrect, saying it was high, not moderate. Symptoms of the disease include fever, cough, and breathing difficulties.
Now, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says no Pakistani in China has been infected by the new coronavirus. In an interview, he said all precautionary measures are being taken to safeguard the Pakistani community in China. The Foreign Office said Pakistan's embassy in Beijing is in touch with its citizens in China. Prime Minister Imran Khan has ordered an inter-ministerial meeting to discuss preventative measures. In a notification, it is said the meeting will be attended by the Prime Minister's health advisor, the Foreign Office, and health ministry officials. Earlier, the Chinese ambassador to Pakistan, Li Jiangzhao, also assured the safety and health of Pakistani citizens in China. We're now joined by our Islamabad correspondent, Isa Naqvi, for more on that story. Now, Isa, Pakistan's foreign minister has already said Pakistani citizens have not been infected by coronavirus in China. Well, as we know at this point in time, let me just repeat what we know from the Foreign Office at this point in time. The Foreign Office has said that the embassy, Pakistan's embassy that is, in Beijing, is in touch with its citizens in China. Prime Minister Imran Khan has ordered, though, an interministerial meeting to discuss preventative measures regarding the coronavirus outbreak. Let's try and see if we can once again connect with Isa Naqvi. Isa, if you can hear me, what can the Foreign Office or government do to ensure the safety of Pakistanis in China?
Well, Luca, this is an extraordinary and unusual situation, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the government of Pakistan are in constant touch with the Chinese authorities, with the Chinese embassy in Pakistan. So far, the details that we have, according to them, there are about 800 Pakistani students and citizens in Wuhan, and out of which 500 are registered with our embassy in Beijing. The matter of food supply supplies and taking care of Pakistanis has been taken up with the Chinese authorities and with the Chinese embassy. And so far, according to the latest reports, no Pakistani has been infected by this virus. But as of now, the flight operation between Pakistan and China is suspended and will remain suspended till 3rd of February, after which the situation will be assessed and decisions will be taken accordingly.
Issa, also tell us then about the measures that the government has already taken at the local level then to deal with the possible threat. You mentioned, of course, flights, but what else have they done?
Yes, what has been done so far is that after the instructions of Prime Minister Imran Khan, a 15-member interministerial committee has been constituted, which will have a meeting shortly and will discuss the ways and means. This is a kind of situation, our sources say, that the government of Pakistan or even the Chinese authorities have not dealt with previously. So they are going to assess the situation using a 360 view of the situation, how the screening of the Chinese nationals in Pakistan will be done. So far, we know that majority of the Chinese national who live in Pakistan for work, who are working at the CPAC projects, they are in China on the holidays, the annual holidays as the new year starts. But after the flight operation is open again, when they return to Pakistan, what mechanism or what SOPs would be followed, whether the decision has to be taken, whether they have to be they have to remain under observation for 14 days. So all these decisions will be taken by the government of Pakistan, but the screening of some Chinese nationals who are working in Pakistan has already started, and also the ways and means through which Pakistanis living in China can be repatriated to Pakistan, that is also being discussed.
Very well, Issa. We appreciate you up to date on this important story. That was Issa Naqvi, our correspondent, speaking to us from Islamabad. Let's move on with the news now. A leader of the Indian ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, Anurag Thakur, has incited violence against anti-citizenship law protesters. Speaking at a rally in New Delhi, Thakur asked the crowd to chant, "Shoot down traitors." In a video, Thakur can be seen shouting, "Traitors of India," to which the crowd responds, "Must be shot down." India's election commission has so far not taken any action against the hate speech. Meanwhile, the countrywide sit-in against the anti-Muslim law continues in Kolkata, New Delhi, Mumbai and Lucknow. The all-women sit-ins have refused to end the protests until the government withdraws the controversial act. Also in India, the Supreme Court has granted bail to 17 convicts of the 2002 Gujarat riots. The convicts were serving life terms for burning alive 33 Muslims in Sardarpura village of Mehsana district. In its verdict, the top court ordered the convicts to social and spiritual services. The court told offenders to leave Gujarat and move to the state of Madhya Pradesh. 14 out of the 31 convicts were already acquitted by the Gujarat High Court in 2016. At least 1,000 people, mostly Muslims, were killed in the three-day violence while Narendra Modi was the state's chief minister. On to the U.S. now, where President Donald Trump says his Middle East peace plan will be unveiled today. He was speaking alongside Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. Trump said Palestinians would ultimately support his plan. Netanyahu says the peace plan may be the opportunity of a century. Meanwhile, dozens of activists have been protesting against Trump's peace plan outside a UN office in Gaza City. Earlier, Palestine's Prime Minister Mohammed Shataya urged the international community to boycott the plan. Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he is withdrawing his bid for parliamentary immunity from prosecution on corruption charges. In a statement, the Prime Minister said Parliament's immunity proceedings would have been a circus, and he did not want to take part in the dirty game. Netanyahu said he has informed the Knesset Speaker about his decision. Earlier this month, Netanyahu said he would seek parliamentary immunity in 3 graft cases that could have delayed criminal proceedings for months. In November last year, Netanyahu was indicted on charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. Saudi Arabia has refused to allow Israeli citizens to enter the country. In an interview, Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan said Tel Aviv's permission to its citizens to visit Saudi Arabia is irrelevant. Farhan said Israel's involvement in the region can only be discussed after it reaches a peace agreement with Palestinians. He stressed the kingdom's no ties with Israel policy. Earlier on Sunday, Israel's Interior Ministry allowed citizens to visit Saudi Arabia for trade or investment purposes. The UN Security Council has called for an emergency closed-door meeting today at Britain's request over a fresh outburst of fighting in Yemen. Battles between the government coalition and Houthi rebels have increased, killing hundreds over the past week. The US-backed Arab coalition stepped up its airstrikes on rebel targets in Sana'a, while Houthis began shelling government-held areas. Houthi officials say the coalition launched 29 airstrikes targeting the front lines at Sana'a, Al-Jawf, and Najran. They claimed significant gains with the capture of the strategic road linking Ma'rib with the border province of Al-Jawf. The Yemeni Prime Minister Ma'in Abdul Malik Saeed says his government will confront the Houthi advances. Meanwhile, the UN envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, says the combatants must reduce the violence and renew commitments to a peaceful resolution. The U.S. has urged Iraq to uphold its sovereignty in the face of alleged attacks by Iran on U.S. facilities in Baghdad. In a phone call with Iraqi Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo expressed outrage at the assaults. The Iraqi Prime Minister's office said Mahdi promised to strengthen security for the American embassy in Baghdad. Pompeo's call came after a mortar attack on the consulate, which resulted in 3 injuries. The secretary urged the Iraqi government to protect facilities as protests against Baghdad and U.S. forces spark fears of a wider conflict. The State Department's statement said the attacks demonstrate a wanton disregard for Iraqi sovereignty. It said they also represent a failure to rein in dangerous armed groups. Meanwhile, anti-government protests in Baghdad continue for a 3rd day, despite clashes with security forces. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani says ties between Tehran and Moscow are growing despite U.S. pressure. Rouhani met the chairman of the Russian Assembly's lower house, Vyacheslav Volodin, in Tehran. The president said bilateral agreements are being implemented and 2 countries' parliaments can help develop ties. He also hailed Moscow's stance over the assassination of Commander Qasem Soleimani. Rouhani said joint maneuvers between Iran, Russia, and China mean that the 3 countries are determined to have closer relations. Volodin said Tehran-Moscow ties are in a good momentum and the Russian Assembly would help implement the government's decisions. Now, despite the ongoing crisis in bilateral ties, Russia and the EU are drafting 7 programs for cross-border cooperation. The plans will be effective for a 7-year period from 2021 till 2027. Russia's permanent representative to the EU, Vladimir Chizov, says Moscow's relations with the bloc have never completely frozen. Chizov said unilateral restrictive measures imposed by the EU against Russia do not apply to cross-border cooperation. Russia is currently liaising with 6 EU nations, including Poland, Lithuania, Finland, and Sweden. The EU has warned Britain it will never compromise on the integrity of its single market. The EU's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, was speaking at Queen's University in Belfast. Barnier termed the single market bloc's most valuable asset and said frictionless trade between the UK and the EU was impossible. He said London must now face reality after underestimating the costs of leaving. He said Brexit bears negative consequences and will always be a matter of damage limitation. Barnier said if no trade agreement is reached, Britain still faces the risk of a cliff-edge Brexit in 2021.
The future partnership between the EU and the UK is so another huge challenge. A new clock is ticking. 11 months is extremely short. Prime Minister Johnson has said he will not extend this period.
Now, it's the final week in Brussels for the 71 British members of the European Parliament. It's a painful time for those British MEPs who believed in the European Union. But for those who believed in Brexit, it is a moment of victory.
Labour Party delegation leader Richard Corbett has been a member of the European Parliament since 1996. Now the British Prime Minister Jeremy Corbyn's Brexit plans have fallen into place. Corbett's run in Brussels is ending on midnight this Friday. He terms the Brexit campaign that won the 2016 referendum one of the most dishonest in the UK's political history.
I was first interviewed on this very bench 20-something years ago, so to come back here in a way to end it off is a very special moment. The next few days I'm packing up my boxes, I'm making, sadly, my staff redundant. I'm beginning to think what I might do for the future, but I've not decided yet.
Brexit Party MEP Claire Fox has a different take on matters. She says the European Parliament is too inefficient at legislating and sees the unelected European Commission's role in the EU as undemocratic. For her and other Brexit Party MEPs, this is a historical victory for their country.
Of course, I'm pleased because now I feel that people will at least feel the first stage has happened. You know, we will have technically left the European Union, and we decided to do that a long time ago. So, of course, I'm relieved at that.
Pro-EU MEPs fear that with a right-wing government running the UK without the EU's regulations, environmental protection will be weakened and workers' rights watered down. But these battles must now be fought at home, not in Brussels.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel has renewed her support for EU membership negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia. Merkel was speaking ahead of her meeting with the Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama in Berlin. Merkel said Germany supports the inclusion of Western Balkan states in the EU. The Chancellor said the European Union will also greatly benefit from the region's integration into the body. She said both countries have made significant progress in recent years, including judicial reforms. Last year, France blocked the opening of EU membership talks with Albania and North Macedonia, saying more work needed to be done. Now, anti-Muslim hate crimes in France have jumped by 54% in the past year. The National Observatory of Islamophobia says 154 such attacks were recorded in 2019. Most attacks occurred in the Ile-de-France, Rhône-Alpes and PACA regions of the country. It said the country recorded 100 Islamophobic assaults in 2018. France has the largest Muslim population in Europe at 5 million, mostly from North Africa. The UN has held Libya's rebel commander Khalifa Haftar responsible for killing 53 migrants in Tajura last July. The body has called for a deeper investigation to decide if the attack amounts to war crimes and to fix responsibility. In its investigation report, the UN's support mission in Libya said the airstrikes were either carried out by the LNA or a country supporting Khalifa Haftar. The report says Haftar's forces had complete information about the presence of unarmed refugees at the camp. It also points out there were 2 air raids on the same camp, which rules out a lack of information about the target. The report has also criticized the UN-recognized Libyan government for its failure to relocate the refugees after the first attack. U.S. President Donald Trump has discussed developments in Syria and Libya with his Turkish counterpart, Tayyip Erdogan. White House spokesperson Judd Deere said the two leaders discussed the need to eliminate foreign interference in Libya on a phone call. Deere said Trump and Erdogan emphasized on maintaining a ceasefire in Tripoli. He said both leaders agreed that the violence being carried out in Idlib must stop. During the phone call, the two leaders also discussed the situation in the eastern Mediterranean. The UN says the Sahel has seen a significant increase in violence against children as the insurgency rages across the region. UNICEF says in a report, 277 children were either killed or maimed in Mali alone during the first 9 months of 2019.
The report said the number of children affected has doubled over the previous year, with nearly 5 million needing humanitarian aid. UNICEF says despite support from French and UN troops, Mali has been struggling to quell an insurgency that broke out in 2012. French Armed Forces Minister Florence Parly has warned the expected US withdrawal from the region will make matters worse.
The US support is critical to our operations, and that its reduction would severely limit our effectiveness against terrorists. But as it has been said, the decision is not yet made.
The conflict has since spread to the neighboring states of Burkina Faso and Niger, inflaming ethnic tensions along the way.
In northern Africa, 6 Chadian soldiers have been killed in an ambush blamed on Boko Haram in the volatile Lake Chad region. The army said 10 others were wounded in the intense attack on Tetewa Island in the lake. It said the soldiers were on patrol when they were ambushed near the town of Mandrari. Chad has seen an increase in militant attacks since the beginning of this year. On January 20th, a female suicide bomber killed 9 civilians in the village of Kaiga Kinjiria. Boko Haram was formed in Nigeria, but its attacks have spread to neighboring countries. Elsewhere in New Zealand, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has announced the date for the next general election and her bid for a second term. The country will also vote in referendums on the divisive issues of legalizing cannabis and euthanasia. Ardern's popularity soared after national and global praise for the way that she handled the Christchurch mosque terrorist attacks. But her popularity has taken a hit as the country's economy struggles with slow growth and low business confidence. At a news conference, Ardern said the government is working on New Zealand's long-term challenges.
As for us as a government, this year we intend to govern right up until the election is held, which today I can advise will be on the 19th of September. This election, I will be asking New Zealanders to continue to support my leadership.
Australia has warned of a new rise in bushfires with predictions that soaring temperatures and high winds will make a return. Officials say the changing weather could reignite some fires and ignite fresh ones in the hard-hit eastern states. The New South Wales Rural Fire Service has told its communities to strengthen bushfire defences. In the meantime, thick hazardous smoke is covering the Australian capital, Canberra. Defence and Emergency Services officials have urged residents, I should say, to be ready to evacuate. Since September, Australia has been battling bushfires that have killed 33 people and over 1 billion native animals. Bolivia's ex-president Evo Morales has criticized the candidacy of his successor, interim president Jeanine Áñez. Áñez had announced that she would be a candidate in the election on May the 3rd. The ex-president said Áñez's decision to run casts a great doubt over the transparency of these elections. He described or criticized Áñez for running for president.
I want to take this opportunity to warn the Bolivian people and interim President Jeanine Áñez's dictatorship. They say they are transitional government. To us, they are coup-mongers and they have a dictatorship.
12 people, including a woman and 2 children, have died in a fire that broke out here in Lahore. Emergency services say 2 others have been injured. Officials say the blaze began when a cylinder exploded at a spray factory in the Shahdra area of the city. They say the intensity of the fire caused the building to collapse. 10 fire vehicles reached the spot and brought the fire under control. Now, the UK is set to decide the future of Huawei's 5G network today at a National Security Council meeting. Ahead of today's meeting, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said British consumers can access the new technology without compromising national security. Britain faces intense US pressure to block Huawei, which Washington argues can compromise British secrets. Johnson said any decision on Huawei's future will not affect the Five Eyes security relationships with key allies. Well, the UK and the US are currently in the process of negotiating a post-Brexit free trade agreement. Now, stock markets across Europe are trading higher after posting nearly 4 months low in their previous session. Investors are on a buying spree after yesterday's panic sell-off undervalued major stocks. The CAC 40 in Paris is trading fractionally up as French corporate services provider Edenred stocks gained over 4.5%. Frankfurt's DAX and London's FTSE 100 are also trading fractionally higher. In Asia, Seoul's Kospi led the losses, closing over 3% lower. The Nikkei 225 lost over 0.5%. Meanwhile, international oil prices have plunged over 0.5% amid slowing global economy over coronavirus fears. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. And with that, you're all caught up. Thank you for watching this bulletin. You're on News.